10 o'clock here on the East Coast. And this one I've been kind of chasing for a while in my brain. And I finally had the courage and fortitude to pull this off. To discuss USL Championship, I wanted to go to Detroit and bring in our friend Neal Ruhl for the first time ever in the history of the program. Neal visits wearing the LaRouge gear. Longtime voice of Detroit City. Neal, thanks for hanging out with us here on SDH.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks for having me, man. I certainly do appreciate it. Ready to go this weekend.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and in honor of your LaRouge, I will see your LaRouge and I will raise you a Detroit Express T-shirt this morning.
I have that shirt in the repertoire as well. The old NASL days. It's funny because Roger Faulkner, who was one of the owners of the Detroit Express back in the day, he and I have become pretty good friends through my time at Detroit City FC. So I had the chance to have a couple of drinks with him, and we kind of chop it up about those days. It's really cool to talk to him about that.
Is there a story that you can divulge? If you're chopping it up, is there a story that can be divulged, or is it all kind of secret?
Yeah, the stuff that we talk about, I don't know if they necessarily would want that out there. I mean, well, whatever, Here, I got a good one for you. So he talked about the time when they were pitching the World Cup, because some people don't know, in 1994 when the USA hosted the World Cup, they had some matches in the Pontiac Silverdome, and it was newsworthy because they played on grass, but they played indoors. And he told me about the time when they pitched it to U.S. Soccer about having it there. They made sure, like when they did the walkthrough, because Silverdome didn't have air conditioning back then. So when they did the pitch to them, they did the walkthrough. They brought them out, in the springtime, not in the summertime, so they could kind of pull the fast one on them. Because when they had the games at the Silverdome, it was like 100 degrees inside the Silverdome. So, they kind of slid one by right there, but it was pretty cool to talk to them about that kind of stuff.
Reason that I brought you in is that on Thursdays during the USL Championship season, we have our friends from the USL show over in Birmingham, and we bring them on and we talk about what's going on in USL Championship. When an 8 seed knocks off a 1, that sends out my spidey senses, and I want to send out flares and go in as many directions as humanly possible, and that's why I reached out. Is there any truth to the rumor that Bob Lilly is still yelling at Pittsburgh Riverhounds players, and he has not left Highmark Stadium and has not allowed them to leave ever since an 8 seed knocked off a 1 last weekend?
I doubt that's the case. Bob Lilly's one of the very, very good coaches in this league. It's funny you talk about that. Bob Lilly actually had a stopover in Detroit during his coaching career. He coached the Detroit Ignition in the Arena Soccer League, and had a very, very good run there. No, Bob Lilly's a great coach, man. And what was interesting to me is, for those that watched that match, Detroit City FC pulled off the classic blueprint for how an 8 seed goes into a 1 seed and wins. And, in that match, it was interesting to me because you could see the frustration growing with Pittsburgh. And I sent out a tweet after the match that I kind of gave my thoughts on the match. And I said, Detroit was the better side. Detroit City was the better side in that match, and they frustrated them, and you could see that frustration taking over. And look, that's not uncommon, especially in the playoffs. But that's the whipsaw of when you have everything locked up and you've got the best record, you have the home pitch advantage, and all that kind of stuff. That can be a detriment, man. The longer that game goes, where you don't have a goal, the screws tighten and the pressure cooker turns up. And Detroit City FC was able to turn that pressure cooker up, and Pittsburgh succumbed to it a little bit. And you saw, I don't want to call it desperation, because Bob Lilly has forgotten more about soccer this morning than I'll know in my life. And, you could see almost an air of desperation, even in the 60th minute, which is kind of wild because, coaches usually tell me, once your antenna goes up about the 70th minute, and then in the 80th minute, that's when things become real. But I think Detroit City FC, while they might not have gotten a lot of credit for that, they deserve a lot of the credit for it because they're the one that flipped that script on Pittsburgh, and that was the classic blueprint for how an 8 seed beats a 1 seed.
And I know that the folks here in the Southeast from their time in USL Championship before folks go and transfer over to MLS Next Pro got to watch Detroit City and how stylistically what Trevor James can do in a match-by-match situation to find those advantages, take advantage of those situations. And even if it is that emotional ramping up of the pressure from the other guy and making things tight where you're kind of playing with house money as an 8, it was that element of you could almost see the gears turning faster and faster and faster for Pittsburgh, and the smoke is coming out of their ears and nothing is being successful, and it amplifies and it amplifies and it amplifies. When you got a guy between the sticks like Nate Steinwasser, who I think is one of the more underappreciated keepers in USL Championship, that's another element of all of this.
No, he is he may be the most underappreciated player, because when you talk about what Nate Steinwasser has been able to do for this club, and we had our media availability with Trevor James on yesterday before we get ready to ramp things up for the broadcast of the match here in Detroit on TV 20. But we have talked about that in the past with Nate Steinwasser, and look, like he doesn't fit the profile, right? Because he's not 6'2", he's not an athletic freak, and people see that and they're very dismissive of Nate Steinwasser. But I deal in facts. Like that's maybe to a fault sometimes, but I deal in facts, and the facts are this: his resume is as good as any 6'2" or any real athletic keeper, any keeper, period, in this league. His resume is as good as any. And you look at Detroit City FC. Maybe they don't have the depth of high level players, maybe just in terms of professionals, right? We're guys that have been around the block. And when you call these matches, you look, and Louisville's one of these teams, guys, 200 USL matches, guys have spent 3 seasons in the MLS. Detroit City has a few of those guys. Don't get me wrong, but Nate Steinwasser has been the equalizer. And from the second he stepped on the turf at Keyworth, and the second he's put on that LaRouge jersey, he's produced. And he's produced at as high a level as anybody, whatever level they've been in. And I don't know why that is. I don't know why he doesn't get the credit. I know Nate doesn't care. I've gotten the good fortune to know Nate personally a little bit. He just goes on about his life. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter to him. But I find it fascinating, man, in today's day and age where everybody runs to stats, because he's got the stats. It's weird with Nate, because when people don't talk about him, they say, well, he doesn't look the part, and they ignore the stats. The stats, tied for second in clean sheets, tied for 4th in USL in saves. He's as good as anybody, man. And that's always been something that's kind of low-key bothered me a little bit, like with the media people that cover this league. They've been very dismissive of what he does. And, whatever I can do to shine a light on that, I'm going to do, because he's brilliant. He's magnificent, and he's one of the best there is in this league, period, hard stop.
As a hockey guy, Nate reminds me of a Dominik Hasek type goalie transferred over to soccer. You look at things stylistically and you can't quite pin him down into, okay, well, he's butterfly, or he's going to make sure that he's as large a target as possible. He'll look at angles. He knows how to do things. You can't pin him down stylistically. He doesn't look like your average normal keeper. And yes, I did use air quotes for those people who are just listening. And it's just, you can't pin him down. But by the end of the day, you mention all of these stats, and you can be as unconventional as you want. I mean, look, if you're playing golf and you get up to the 18th tee and your backswing looks like Jim Furyk, and you could have a sandwich and you could be at the back of it, but the bottom line is, at the end of the day, on your follow-through, you hit it 280 to 320. The backswing doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter how you look. It shouldn't matter how you attack angles. The bottom line is, Nate, to me, has been one of the most underappreciated, like we've been talking about, talents that the league has seen in quite some time.
No, it is. And the moral of the story is this: when you're a club and you play against Detroit City FC, chances are you're not going to score that day. And there's reasons for it. Nate would tell you that the guys in front of him, certainly are a big reason for that as well. But I've seen him make so many high-level saves, not in technique or anything like that, just very high leverage shots, I guess, if you want to use an analytic term, high conversion percentage shots that he turns away. And I see it repeatedly. And I'll tell you this too, John, like it's to the point where you sit there and watch, you almost expect it now. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, it's just one of those things where when you see it with him, you borderline expect it now. You're almost stunned when he doesn't stop somebody right on the 6 line with the whole net to shoot at. And you're like, man, what happened there, Nate? That's what you're thinking. But that's how good he's been. That's how good he is.
Now you're looking at not the 4, but the 5, and just the craziness of the Eastern Conference in general. It's an 8, it's a 5, it's a 3, and it's a 7. Next trip for Detroit City is Lou City. It's not to Memphis. They go PKs. Aiden McFadden hits the post, and now you're a part of a 5 and an 8. What has Study Hall been like for you getting ready for this one?
I mean, it hasn't. I'll be honest with you. It hasn't been a lot because there's such a great history between Detroit City and Lou City, and this is a rivalry. Make no mistake about it. Because look, what makes a great rivalry when you play for stakes, right? They played in the U.S. Open Cup, and they played all these great matches throughout time. You know, it's a short time, obviously, but they played each other a ton over the last 2 years. And the players don't really change for Lou City. They have, as I talked about earlier, they got pros. I mean, they got guys that, you know, if you want to break it down, I bet would have every opportunity. And, you know, from things that I've heard from people I've talked to across the league, they have players that could be playing in MLS that chose to go to Lou City instead. So, I mean, those are the type of players that they have, the level of players that they have. And that is what I love about this, like Detroit City FC and Lou City and this matchup and everything like that. The cities, the fan bases do not like each other. That's documented if you spend any time in the social media sphere. That is documented on both sides. You know, I know the Northern Guard gets a bad rap for some reason because of the passion that they have for their club. I can tell you that the Lou City fan base is every bit that as well. And I've dealt with it personally. I've seen it across all the forums and all that kind of stuff. So, but this is what I like. This is why I love doing this job, because there isn't a lot to quote unquote prepare for. And yes, for those listening, I did use air quotes right there because John said it was okay. But you know, it is. I love this because there's no secrets. Like, they're going to kick this ball off tomorrow night, man. And we've seen it all. We've seen the players. We know what they're going to do, and it's going to be a battle of will.
When you look at what, I guess this is the philosophical question here. Neal Ruhl hanging out with us, play-by-play for Detroit City, getting ready for a 5 and an 8 in the Eastern Conference and USL Championship. What's it been like for you personally to see where Detroit City was as a franchise and has worked their way up the ladder, and they're in USL Championship, making playoff runs, and with everything that everyone's done there to make Keyworth what it is and have it be this great beacon of local involvement? What's it been like for you to see Detroit City take all of these different steps to get where they are today?
No, I enjoy it. Number one, and look, I'll be real with it too. Detroit City FC, just the visibility of the club, the passion of the fan base, I've benefited a lot from it. You know, I've been able to call matches at soccer at the highest levels, and that's because, you know, the exposure I've gotten from Detroit City FC, and that's because their fans watch. You know, one of the highest rated clubs in all of USL, like when you look at television ratings and all those kinds of things. I mean, they're passionate about it, and I've enjoyed it too because, look, I'm a sports fan, John. Like, I'm like you, I'm like everybody else, man. I love sports. Like, that's why I do what I do for a living. And Detroit City FC is everything that you say you want in a sports in a sports team that you root for. They're everything that you say. The growth is organic. There's nothing plastic about the franchise. It's not corporate by any means. Spend some time with the ownership here. You know, it's not corporate by any means. You know, they just look at what they did with Keyworth Stadium, in that, you know, they kind of crowdfunded the renovations, the money for the renovations to do it. They paid everybody back with interest through beer sales and alcohol sales at the stadium. And then they're going to, you know, it's in Hamtramck when their time comes, you know, whenever that day comes where they maybe build a new stadium or move on to the league that they're going to move on to or relocate or anything like that. They just hand the stadium back over renovated to Hamtramck Public Schools. That's what you want as a sports fan. You go to the match, you know, as a fan, the season tickets, very, very affordable. They're not looking to jack you at the concession stand, or they're not trying to squeeze every dime out of you. It's one of those things where this is what you say you want. And to be honest with you, calling the matches here on television in Detroit, there's been times where it's gotten more engagement than the professional sports teams in this town, which is, the four major, I guess, professional sports teams in this town. And, it's been incredible to see that growth and to be a part of it and everything like that. And, I get to see it and everything like that, but I've benefited a lot from it personally. I've never really talked about that a lot, but, and without Detroit City FC and without that fan base, those kinds of things would never happen to me. So, it's one of those things where it's everything you say you want as a sports fan, and it's been incredible. The stadium's filled every single night, sellouts all the time, and you walk around town here, and the La Rouge and the Detroit City FC crest has become a very prevalent fixture. Just you go to the grocery store, you're going to run into somebody wearing a Detroit City FC shirt, just as you will, Pistons, Lions, Red Wings, Tigers. It's become a part of the fabric of Detroit sports.
When you mentioned fabric, obviously I can't escape our conversation without talking about Trevor James and what he has meant to the fabric of Detroit City. He's going upstairs after this season. What has he meant? And I don't think it can be understated, the levels, but what has he meant to the growth of the franchise as you've gone?
Well, I mean, the bottom line is this is a bottom line business. It's professional sports. We're talking about winning. Winning matters, and winning is what dictates. Like, these are all cool stories we're talking about right now, but if you don't win, that's not sustainable. And he's won. And I saw the stat, like his all-time record here at Detroit City FC, 80% of the time when Trevor James manages your team, you get a result. You get a win or a draw. 80%, 8 out of 10 for the math challenge like me. That's incredible. That is unbelievable. And, it does. It just goes to show you, too, like when you look at what Trevor's done here with this club, and stylistically, here's another reason why it works. And I always walk away sometimes from Keyworth if Detroit City FC gets a 1-0 win or, however it shakes out. Stylistically, what he's done is it's not just like they park the bus in front of the net and things like that. Like he uses the wings. And there's a stylistically appealing way that Detroit City FC plays soccer. Sure, they defend. Absolutely, they defend. But they're able to spark attack through that. And it's a pretty unique system, and it's something where you're seeing this more and more, and I've seen this kind of turn with soccer. And soccer's no different than any other of the professional sports around. It's kind of become a matchups-driven game where you would find your best matchup and you try to exploit it. And Trevor James has done that with the wing play. Reese Williams is kind of an unsung guy for Detroit City FC, because when you play at the wing spot in Trevor James' system, he's asking more of you. Right or wrong, that's the way it is, because you key the attack and you're the key component in the defense as well. And I'll watch Reese Williams sprint 80 yards up and then 80 yards back, and it's a high work rate position. And when you're done, Maxi Rodriguez in the midfield is another guy. When you're done, you've ran 10, 11 miles in this setup. So it's something unique what he's done, not only from a results, driven perspective, but as I said, it's stylistically appealing too.
All right, 2 more questions, and thanks for hanging out with us. First question, cut the promo for me for the broadcast plans for the street fight that's going to be Lou City and Detroit City.
No, there's no secrets. Nobody's coming out fighting southpaw or looking to switch anything on you. And this is what it is. You like sports. You like rivalries. I don't care if you're a soccer fan. If you like rivalries that play each other for the highest stakes, and this is pretty much the highest stakes in the game right now, you're tuning into this because it's going to be intense. And it's going to be intense for 90 minutes and more, maybe more. Who knows how it's going to go down. But I got nothing to sell. There's no sales tricks needed for this one. This is 2 teams that don't like each other, 2 fan bases that don't like each other, playing for the highest stakes. 90 minutes, someone goes on and someone goes home. What more do you want, man? I don't have to sell that to you.
Mm-hmm. So it is a window for an 8 seed that can be handled to get into the Eastern Conference Finals in the USL Championship. And my last question, how's Oakland going to be in the Horizon League this year?
In terms of basketball or soccer?
Basketball. Hey, basketball. I want to talk hoops as much as soccer. You can talk soccer. Hit soccer for me too.
Yeah, Oakland, they're at the top of the table right now in the Horizon League, and they're closing in, on the soccer side, the men's soccer side, they're closing in on another Horizon League championship with Coach Eric Pogue. But in basketball, it won't be a vintage Greg Campy team. They got some questions at the point guard spot. Jalen Moore, the longtime record-setting point guard, has left. He's playing professionally overseas now. So it's one of those transition years at the point guard. They'll get it figured out, though. They have the resume. You know that at the end of the day, they'll get it figured out. Greg Campy's as good as it gets.
Neal Ruhl, play-by-play voice for Detroit City and everything with our friends with the Golden Grizzlies at Oakland as well. Thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for making your debut here on SDH and breaking down how an 8 seed took out a 1 and how you probably can take out a 5 the way that you've been doing things. I want to see this charge. I want an 8 to go as far as humanly possible because it's an 8.
No, and John, look, man, real quick before we get moving on here, yeah. I've always laughed at that. The 8 seed, the 1 seed thing. You play the season, you get the number next to your name, and that's it. Especially in soccer, and you reference hockey as well. There is a formula for those teams to win. And in Detroit City FC, they executed it to a T in Pittsburgh, and we'll see if they can do it again in Louisville tomorrow night. And
when you got a hot keeper, that means you got a hot goalie, man. You just ask the Kings about Jonathan Quick. If you get a hot goalie, and you can charge through. Be safe. May everything reach its slot. May the producers give you extra time to talk about everything that you need to talk about. Have a hell of a show and go get them.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate the time.
All right, Neal Ruhl.